Astrophotography is a hobby of patience. There are many factors that are simply out of your control that dictate whether or not you have a successful night of imaging or a wasted night of imaging. Factors such as weather patterns, clouds, moon phases, and recently smoke from local wildfires have all prevented me from going out at night and taking a good astrophotography image. But it's also a hobby of perseverance. I got my first telescope in roughly 2019, and it wasn't until relatively recently that I've been able to get decent photos out of my workflows. The learning curve is steep, and there is much to learn in a hobby like this. Not only do you need to know the basics of photography, but you also need to know the basics of astronomy. You need to know how to find your target, where it is in the sky, how it moves across the sky, and that all encompasses things such as polar aligning, star aligning, focusing, and much more. And if you're anything like me, you didn't really have much experience coming into this, and for me personally, once I started this hobby, I began the long and grueling process of trial and error to see what worked and what didn't work. But that's why I'm here tonight. One of the very first objects I was able to capture with my telescope was the Dumbbell Nebula M27. At the time, it was just a little blue blob on my telescope, but that little image is what helped keep me going and progressing to where I am now. So as part of the goal tonight is to see how much I've really progressed from 2019 to now. My name is Justin, and welcome to FX4 Astro. As I said earlier, M27, the Dumbbell Nebula, was the first object I was able to successfully capture on my telescope and see after a bit of post-processing. And at the time, all I had to work with was a Stellarium 5SD and a unmodified Nikon D60 camera, and they sat on an Alt-Az Go-To mount. I had no concept of how to properly polar align. I barely even knew how to star align the mount, and I wasn't even sure what I was looking at in the sky. But that one little victory of capturing the Dumbbell Nebula was all that I needed to help push me forward. And for tonight, I'm really excited to see how much better I can do this time around. My progress getting this far, however, was not easy. I started off knowing that I just needed a telescope and a camera. And at first I thought that's all I needed. Unfortunately, that led me down some rabbit holes that ended me wasting a lot of time and money. I firstly started off with a Celestron astronomy camera. It was discontinued, I don't remember exactly what it's called. But I had bought it used from a used telescope store, and it immediately broke. So it was good for maybe a few weeks, and then I was out a camera. Not to be set back, I went online and looked for cheap DSLRs to use and found a used Nikon D60. So I went and purchased that. However, I soon found out that you can't program that to take long exposures. You have to manually hold the shutter release button down for as long as you want it to. And of course, that didn't work out very well either. However, that worked out just well enough for me to be able to capture the Dumbbell Nebula, which is great because it got me to this point. So, even though I had a lot of issues with gear, it taught me a lot about what I needed to know and what I actually needed to do what I wanted to do. My next big challenge was the mount. So as I said earlier, I started off with an Alt-Az mount that came with an Nexstar 5SC. That's great and all, however, I didn't realize about the field rotation that comes with a Alt-Az mount as compared to a German equatorial mount. So I figured out, well, I needed to go to German equatorial mount to fix my setup. And I went and I researched, and from the same telescope store, I had bought a brand new Meade LX85 German equatorial go-to mount. And spec-wise, it's great. It has a max capacity of like 35 pounds. It can track, it has a database of like 40,000 different objects. However, I had that for maybe about a couple months, and then that broke too. and that was a giant debacle because it took about 8 months to get it sorted out with Mead, send it down to California, to get it sent to Mexico, to get it repaired, but it just ended up being replaced, get sent back to California, and then sent back to me up in BC. So that was a big waste of time, and although it didn't cost me anything for the repair, I did have to pay for all the shipping, and that was a big waste of money. But all in all said, here I am today, taking these cool photos, and hopefully I can rectify my mount issue in the future, but for now, it seems to be working okay.
So here we are in Stellarium. This is kind of a useful free tool that I use to help figure out where things I need to find are in the sky, and if they're at a good angle for viewing that night. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to skip the time forward to about 10 o'clock. Oh, that's a little far. It's 11:30. Oops. There we go, 10 o'clock. I'm going to turn on the constellation lights and labels for reference sake, and then we're going to search for the Dumbbell Nebula since that's our target tonight. So, if we zoom in a little bit here, we should see our target up here, this apple core looking red and blue nebula here. Its position in the sky is right below Cygnus, so there's Deneb, there's Altair, two really bright stars, and there's Vega. So, in the southwest sky here, we can find Saturn and Vega, and then we can find the Dumbbell Nebula right here below Cygnus. The visual magnitude is 7.4, so it's pretty dim. I'm not sure if we'll be able to see it through the preview in the astrophotography tool program that we're going to be using to take these images, but I do live in a class 4 borderline sky, borderline 5, so we might be able to see it. Another cool tool that I use for framing is an online tool called Telescopius. It's a telescope simulator that lets you plug in whatever object you want. It lets you plug in your telescope parameters. So for example, my main imaging telescope is the Explorer Scientific ED102, has a native focal length of 714 and 102mm aperture, which is 4 inches-ish. And I also have a 0.8 times field flattener reducer on it. So let's go ahead and look up our target here, M27. The Dumbbell Nebula, and it takes us right to it here. It looks a little bit small in this frame, and admittedly this target is a bit small for this focal length. Ideally I'd have a longer focal length, but since my ED102 is a triple APO, I'm hoping I'll be able to pull out some nice detail in this if I zoom in. I could take the Barlow off and it would zoom in a little bit, however I can't get proper back focus if I do that, so I'm going to leave the Barlow on. This tool is really handy. It helps you figure out your framing really well. It lets you rotate your camera, to see how that works out. If you want to take a mosaic, so you want to do a 2x2 mosaic, you can do that, and it gives you the coordinates here for what you need to plug into your telescope. Overall, it's a really cool tool. It tells you exactly what you need to know, and I use it all the time.
The setup we'll be running tonight is my Explorer Scientific ED102 triplet APO. And my primary imaging camera is going to be my one-shot color camera ZWO ASI 294 MC Pro. We'll be cooling it down to minus 10 degrees Celsius, and we'll be shooting through a narrowband filter, the Optilong L-Enhance narrowband filter, so that should pull out the blues and reds nicely in this nebula. It's going to be pretty good. Well, we're in luck. As we can see, the Dumbbell Nebula is centered nice and neatly in our field of view here. I'm pleasantly surprised that actually a lot of it shows up. Even in this 30-second preview, you can see a bit of the red on the outsides and the blues, and the little apple core dumbbell part of the inside. After after post-processing is done, we'll enhance it and we'll get all these nice colors to pop a lot better, but for the time being, it's time to start our imaging plan, and I'll see you when the image is done.